back to Fresh Takes on Tech, the podcast where we dive into the innovations reshaping food, agriculture, and climate. Today, we continue our season on AI, a topic that's on everybody's lips but may not be fully understood. We're joined by Chuck Templeton, founding partner at S2G Ventures. Chuck has spent his career investing in transformational ideas, from building Open Table in the early days of the internet to now funding the companies rethinking how we grow, produce, and consume food. We're going to talk about how AI is changing the investment landscape, who the early winners and losers might be, and how S2G is ensuring that the next wave of innovation leads to a healthier planet. Welcome, Chuck. It's great to have you.
Great. Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, great. So you've been at the forefront of sustainable innovation for years. What was your aha moment around AI and its potential for climate, food, and ag tech?
Hadn't really spent a lot of time thinking about AI until maybe late last year, 2024.
You and
And
everyone
obviously,
else,
I
right?
know, yeah, exactly. So, and suddenly I became in the minority. It felt like that I hadn't thought about it, because it seems like it's changing so fast. No, but and it was really around playing around with it, and sort of the first thing that everyone was doing in the organization, which was just summarizing this document. And here's a long 40-page PDF someone put together, and how do we, instead of reading the whole thing, we get 6 of these in our inbox every day. How could you just read through it? And so that really started to think about what were some of the possibilities with that, and sort of mixing it into how do you think about growing a business in a different way. And so that's where I think sometime late last year, and sort of looking at thinking about how could you summarize it in a way that worked for a particular type of company, or my summary might be different than your summary. And so some of the realizations as to, like, it just wasn't a one size fits all. It really was this ability to customize it depending on the needs or the specifics of an individual, really started as to where I started to get really inspired by the opportunities.
So you were thinking about it at first more of a tool to use internal to S2G and how to use it personally. As you started looking at your investments and the companies that started coming to you, what was kind of how did you start incorporating AI into the investment thesis across the portfolio?
Yeah, so we had a number of our companies, probably like in the 30 to 40% of our companies, who were using AI as sort of the core piece of their differentiated technology and sort of what they were offering, whether it's discovery platforms, machine learning, looking at, how do you look at a greenhouse and understand whether there's, different types of stresses on plants, or they're getting the right nutrition, all that. So using, vision learning for that. And so a lot of our portfolio was using, like I said, 40% or so was using it for that. But there was very little that were using it for some of the other functions within the organization, whether it's marketing, sales, finance, operations, any of those types of, like, specifically functional businesses, and so, or aspects of the business. And so what we started to do then, and over the last sort of 6 months, is really put together a whole program on how do we help these companies sort of do more outside of just the discovery or just the core technology of their. And so we've started, a bunch of different user groups. We have sort of an advanced user group. We have a sort of an up and coming user group. We've done a fair amount of contact. We've got a discussion board. So really starting to lean into how do companies really think about not just using it as the core capability or differentiation that they have, but also in the day-to-day operating aspects of their business.
Oh, that's fascinating. So how do you find that adoption? Do you find that people, especially in technology companies, do you find that they're willing to start using these new tools and adopting, or how do you build a culture that people want to try different things and being willing to fail at them?
Yeah. It's a mindset, right? To me, this is like, if we talked about a specific technology today, maybe by the time you posted this, it would be outdated in,
Yeah.
2 weeks or something, right? And so for us, what we've been really focused on with our entrepreneurs is really about the mindset that you have of how do you think about, from a CEO standpoint, integrating this into the business. You obviously can't tell everyone to stop doing what you're doing and start using this on day one. But what you can do now is really start to look at how do you encourage people to spend 10 or 15% of their day in AI tools, really thinking about what, the opportunities might be. And so what we've really tried to push is that there's an experimental or sort of experimenting mindset that our portfolio and our CEOs have, And even as of late last year, there were some technologies that we were looking at buying that was like an AI technology that took unstructured data and made it structured and helped us take board decks and, get those into,
Yeah.
a structured format so we could look at them a little bit, easier from a financial standpoint. And those technologies were like 80 or $90,000 for the year and a license and all that kind of stuff like that. And now for like $20 a month for ChatGPT, like we can do a lot of that now just by how fast the technologies come along. And so we're really trying to think about from a whether it's a sales standpoint, and sales is actually where a lot of our portfolio companies are really leaning into this and thinking about how do they help the top of their funnel, the middle of their funnel, and the bottom of their funnel, and sort of move from we talk about sort of they're selling, then you get to account-based selling, and this is even maybe a step beyond that of, individual-based selling. So single person, you can target them specifically having content that is more likely for them to be interested in or the way they consume content. If you are a data person, we can, the company can send it in a much more data structured and data, arguments. If you're a narrative person or a story person, the companies are now starting, several of our portfolio companies are now pushing that they send proposals or communications to the portfolio or to their potential customers in a way that is most interesting for the receiver to actually get, if that makes sense.
No, it makes complete sense. I was talking to someone. I haven't tried this yet, but someone was telling me that, oh, it was Elliot Grant, that there's one program where you can give it a topic and it will make a podcast.
Yep.
AI will make a podcast for you. And I'm a very much an auditory learner and consumer. And so for me, that's just great, that
Yeah.
I could actually listen to two people kind of discuss something, instead of trying to read it and understand it.
So I think so building on that and exactly what you're saying, and you totally love that. It's Notebook LM. What you can do is actually put in content about the customer, the target customer, the prospect that you have, put in the solutions that you provide, and then ask the podcast to talk about how the solutions you provide meet the needs or the interests of that particular customer. So it's actually designed specifically, the conversation between those two people or two AIs will be about that aspect. And if you don't like it, you can then like re-record it and try it again in a little bit different way, or maybe you want to make it a little funnier, a little lighter, a little heavier, a little more professional, less professional, so you can sort of nudge it in a particular direction. And like you said, not everyone's going to be the perfect person to get that content, but there is a subset of the world that will actually thrive on that. I'm a much more of an audio person as well. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and that's how I get a lot of my information also. And so it's the perfect type of thing where you can specifically target an individual and how they learn and actually provide content to them in a way that works best for them.
Yeah, I think, probably the future of me doing this type of work on podcasting is somewhat limited, but we'll hope that people will still stay involved in podcasting.
Yes,
But I think
they
as
will.
as a way of learning, it's a really great way of learning. Have there been some surprises as you work with companies and they're adopting using AI in different ways? Have there been some surprising ways that you wouldn't have thought of that people have come up with?
Yeah, I mean, there's again, like back to this, using it for a finding individuals and being able to communicate in their sort of methodology. Another, frankly, is where some of these processes to build a proposal for a particular company. We have a company that is really focused on water and water reduction, and actually then being able to look at the hyperscalers and work with them on how do you help them. Um, there's obviously a lot of water in those, cooling to cool the facilities and to cool the data centers, and so but that water's got to come from the local community. And so if there's other ways you can help that community save water, then actually the hyperscaler can take advantage of that. And so that's a very complex puzzle, if you can imagine. You've got your hyperscaler and where they're at. You've got the water sort of shed and what it's doing and who's using water in that. And so being able to figure out who's using water, who needs the water reduction, what tools might be able to help with that water reduction, they can actually now put together a proposal that is targeted at the hyperscaler and it's targeted also at the local. In this case, it's farmers and being able to help them reduce their water usage. And so now the hyperscalers are actually paying the farmers to help them reduce their water usage in a way that Now the farmers don't have to pay for the equipment; they actually do get to save the money. But the hyperscalers now, or the data centers, get to actually take advantage of the water savings in those communities, which now makes a very different business model than there was before on that. Because before it was really targeting farmers to help them save money, reduce the water usage, but there wasn't the economics actually just weren't enough to push a lot of um, farmers to do that reduction. But now there's actually a much more financially viable way for these farmers to do those kinds of things. So some really interesting ways of looking at how do you piece together different needs that people may have to create this all-in-one solution.
That's arable, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
yep, exactly.
I love seeing the ability to go from focusing on farming, and then, like you said, being able to bring in this whole other user group. And um, what a great way to use AI. And I think there's so many things that I'm seeing where you just couldn't have done it before.
Yeah. Each of these proposals used to take about 40 hours to do all the research for it, and
Yeah.
now it can be done in under 30 minutes type of thing.
So are companies still coming to you and saying we're an AI company? Like, is that still, for a while, that was the pitch deck I was seeing. We're an AI company, but have we gotten away from that and people are talking more just about we're a company that does this and this that uses AI? How's that looking right now?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I'm in where you are, the Bay Area, and the Bay Area is the epicenter, like, of this, sort of craziness right now. And I do think there's going to be a boom and a bust. There's, just like dot-com era went through it as well, and
Yeah.
sort of was part of that. However, there's going to be some companies with real value that emerge out of the backside, and those aren't going to be AI companies. Those are going to be companies that solve a particular problem, right, or a particular set of problems in this instance. And so I do think that it's AI enabled is going to be part of it, but I also think that, like, it has to be across the entire business. Like, if you talk to a lot of the entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley right now, and again, not that they know everything, but you're starting to talk to them to really think about how many people are there in the company, right? And so, and what are those people doing? And is this we're going to have less people in the company and have a lower OpEx, or we're going to have more people in the company and try and do a lot more, accomplish a lot more? And so, like, one I was, at an event one night, and it was talking to a bunch of different entrepreneurs, and I was specifically curious about how many people are they going to have in their company, and, like, what is their sort of target ideal. And I had one entrepreneur that told me they had 11 people and they fired 7 of them. They're at 4. They're probably adding a fifth. And they think they want to grow like that for a while. It's not going to be Google, obviously, but, like, it's a decent size. Or they believed a decent size opportunity. Another entrepreneur told me they had 14 people and they might add a couple more, but they thought they'd be in that range. And so it's really a way for them to keep the OpEx low. I mean, a lot of these people obviously paid more than the average employee in many companies, but at the same time, their ability to just iterate and move fast is so much different now than it was. And so, like, as I look at some of our companies who have these long sales cycles and long sort of adoption cycles out there, what it does is allows them to raise a lot less money,
Mm,
allows them to sort of move at the speed of industry and not try and build these massive facilities that oftentimes sit idle for the first 12 or 18 months, and then they start selling customers into some of the usage of these things, like ingredient companies in particular. And it takes them 2, 3, 4 years to fill up these facilities, sometimes with the maximum amount of efficiency out of it. But if you're a smaller company and you have a smaller OpEx, you can actually sort of think about the services you provide in a different way to these companies, to where you can be there's a lot you can get done, but you can be hyper efficient about the amount of capital that you raise or need to get, so that you can't so that you are much more capital efficient to solve some of these bigger opportunities. We talked a little bit about sustainability and things like that. Is that, yes, there's still a need for concrete and steel for a lot of these companies, because they're making things and they're shipping
mm,
things and they're moving things. But at the same time, it actually enables them to be far more efficient, and start to think about third parties and more virtual sort of ecosystems of ways that companies and other multiple companies can actually work together to solve problems. So We're super excited about seeing these companies actually be much more cash efficient as they're growing, to find that product market fit.
As an investor, is that kind of changing your investment thesis then? Because that, I mean, everyone, the biggest problem in ag tech is just how long it takes, like
Hmm.
you said, to if it's got requires a lot of capex, and then it requires a lot of adoption, and then, it just goes on forever before you get your money out of it. So there's still the need, like you said, there's still the need for those products that actually a product goes into the field and gets sprayed or planted or something. But
Hmm.
are you now focusing more on, let's look at solving some of these problems a different way? Or
Hmm.
how are you thinking about that difference between there's still going to have to be some product and some kind of steel and concrete,
Yeah.
and then there's going to be other systems that you're setting up like you're talking about?
Yeah. So for some, not for all, for some, I think there's opportunities to move it or to sort of be funded at the pace of industry, right? And so at the pace that industry moves and at the sales cycle that industry moves, because we have a lot of companies that actually can make more sort of molecules or discover more sort of solutions, whether it's proteins or sweet proteins or others. They can actually discover these things faster than industry can adopt them, right? And if they don't, if they're trying to launch too much at once, there's a J curve, right, for each one of these products that you have, and so you lose money before you start making money. And if you pile up too many of those J curves on top of each other or on below each other, the amount of capital that you spend is crazy. It's too much. And so what this does is this allows smaller teams, in our opinion, to be able to build a sort of a cost structure that's going to take sort of it spends money at the pace that industry can sort of
Ah,
absorb these
uh-huh.
capabilities. And so it's now looking at how do I think about our org structure in a different way that actually will allow us to use time as a friend rather than time as an enemy, right? From the amount of burn that you have and that kind of stuff. So it really is thinking about how do we design these organizations in a way that move at the pace of industry, which is often slower. And there's nothing against the food and ag. You think about, and I've sort of said this before, but Google's been around for 27 years or whatever. It's worth a trillion, a couple trillion dollars. And, some of these food companies have been around for 100 years and they're worth, $40 billion, right? And so it's just, you have to build these businesses at a different pace, a different cost structure than what a typical sort of tech company is built at.
I hadn't thought about this. I mean, everyone keeps saying constantly AI is changing everything, and it is changing everything. But the way that you just described it and how it's changing the way we build companies and the way we finance companies and how companies move and what your future portfolios are going to look like, I hadn't thought about it that way. That really does change everything, right?
It does. It
Yeah.
does. I mean, it reduces the cost structure. And so as an investor, instead of having to, keep watching these businesses burn, 2 million a month or whatever, now
Yeah.
you can burn 250K a month and, you get a lot more runway out of these things to work at the pace of industry.
Yeah, there's been so much gloom and doom recently talking just about what's going to save ag tech because of the current funding cycle and companies are overvalued. And so this actually may be it. What saves ag tech is these kinds of structures,
I
right?
kind of think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
I do.
Wow. That's really exciting. I hadn't thought of it that way. So, in looking at your portfolio now, you talked a little bit about Arable. Can you talk about some other types of companies in your portfolio that are using AI and how they're using it?
Yeah, I mean, so if you look at a company like Brightseed or Shiru, or even Myco, which are all ingredient companies, right? They're able to, again, this is a little bit of what I was saying earlier, discover these, whether it's a bioactive or, sweet protein or products made of mycelia and mushrooms and stuff. The ability for them to discover is, I mean, they're discovering a lot, right? And so and then, they got to work with industry who's, being sort of hit on lots of sides, either both internally about what are these better products? How do you make sure they're, grass and all of the requirements that you need to do from a regulatory and a safety standpoint that are all sort of legitimately important and need to be done. And so, but what this enables them to do is think about different ways that one really sort of we think about as you're disrupting discovery. You have to disrupt what the business model is, and then you have to disrupt what the story is that you're telling, right, in that and do it in different ways that are sort of more cost effective. And so the discovery, a lot of them been using AI for 3, 4, 5 years now. Liche from Brightseed is, he's got the first AI food related patent out there from, I don't know, 15 years ago or something. And so like that aspect of the business has been happening for a while, and now it's sort of reaching, some real velocity in that. Challenge is that industry is not going to absorb, 15 bioactives in 1 year, right? They're just not. And so what now they do is thinking about how do you disrupt your go to market. You can make products so fast now you could potentially give a couple away, right? That like you just put them out like your 17th, 18th and 19th product, like put them out there. Let it be open source, let people use them. It builds that's a now marketing tool, right? Because you weren't going to be able to monetize that product anyway because it's 17 or 18, products from now and you're still trying to monetize your first two, three, four of them type of thing. And so that's now a currency you can use to actually think about how do you get the credibility? How do you think about, other companies, putting maybe you require them to list your company on their label or put like a logo on your packaging, but they get to use that product for free, right? And so it now really starts to put you in the center of I think some free advertising and some free marketing, if you will, if there is a such thing. But it starts to get your name out there a lot more to be able to show that there's possibility or that you've got something that is not just a one hit wonder, but it actually has multiple opportunities or applications that you can use. And so it starts to hopefully cement your name in there as, one of the folks that kind of come and see and talk to. And now you're starting to see like what Shiru's doing with their sort of GLP-1 club they're working on. How do you create sort of a group of non-competitive CPG and other types of companies to be able to work on what are some solutions that have a similar opportunity to what GLP-1 does, but is a different protein or nature identical protein or not. And then you can actually think about a consortium who can think about how do we monetize this together because we need this solution, but it's actually I'm going to use it for beverages, you're going to use it for crackers, someone else is going to use it for food category. And so you're actually creating these groups that can get a product over the line a little bit faster and have less and start to create the critical mass around it.
So you see people working together in kind of a pre-competitive way, and then they take it into their own
Verticals.
categories.
Yep.
Yeah, their
Exactly.
verticals. Yeah. Wow.
Yep. Yeah. And so that because that's a lot of the problem, right? It takes you for a lot of these, it takes you 2 years to raise money to build a facility. It takes you 2 years to build a facility. It takes you 2 years to sell out the facility. And then it takes 2 years to get profitable on that facility, right? And so that's an 8 year. Um, and so if you can close that down to 6 years or 5 years, right? Because you've got this consortium that's working together to create the right pull and enough customer interest, you can build faster, you can raise faster. That should help companies to be more cost efficient and effective.
So those consortia like that. I mean, I worked in early days of clean tech, and we kept trying to talk about that as far as enzyme development and
Hmm.
having a pre-competitive group, and it just never could get quite funded. We'd try to go through universities, or we'd try to get different ways. But how do those types of kind of foundational research get funded? Is that by people like you, or is that like the companies see, okay, we need to create this way of working, or how will that go forward?
Yeah. So the program that Shiru is working on, it's a 5 quarter long sort of group, a cohort that's working together. They're each going to pay. There's 3 different levels of pay that you can do to buy into this group or into these meetings. Then there will be sort of monthly and quarterly meetings that the groups get together and sort of make decisions as a group. But all those are the 3 different levels. I think are 10,000, 20,000, or 10,000, 25,000, and 100,000 a year, depending on sort of some of the outcomes and what access to the product you get at the end of it. But this is where it's almost a no-brainer for these companies to be able to join this type of thing because again, the cost of discovery has collapsed so much
Yeah.
that you don't need. They're not $1 million programs anymore. They're $100,000 programs or a couple $100,000 programs, which and now enables there to be to you to get that because in the past a lot of those two problems a lot of those one is the cash and capital to do it and two is the IP who gets ownership of the IP of that and how do you sort of dole that out or sort of divvy it out But this actually, the way that Shiru's got it designed is actually that all of the companies get to have access to the IP in their verticals, right? And so are in the verticals that they're looking at. So this actually, we believe, and we're starting to see some interest in this GLP-1 process. We're actually seeing the interest in the GLP-1 consortium that's getting together is actually impressive to see. I mean, it's some real brand names that you've seen that are sort of interested and they're going through the process. There's a learning. What does this look like? What is, how do I make sure that, again, I'm going to have access to the IP? I'm a big company. I'm bringing a lot of sort of our data and our knowledge and experience and capabilities, and so there is some of that, but it's actually allowing the capabilities that the Shiru team has really brought to bear. And their 4.5 years they've been working on, or 5 years now they've been working on this AI discovery engine. It's actually making it at a price point that's totally accessible for these large organizations to really start to or dip their toe in the water.
That's really fascinating. Well, Chuck, thank you so much. It's been great talking to you. And it really, along the lines, like I said, of everyone saying AI changes everything, these are a couple areas I hadn't thought about of how you guys are, how S2G is building companies and working with companies and just being able to take some of these products to market without having to spend so much money and kind of reviving the whole investment thesis into food and ag tech. So thank you for doing that for the industry. And it was really great to talk to you.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me, and look forward to keeping connected in the future.